In roughly, forensic genetics is a rapidly evolving science thanks to the growing variety of genetic markers, the establishment of faster, less error-prone sequencing technologies, and more. This case describes a judicial investigation of skeletal remains to identify the subject using various methods. The genetic profiling obtained from typing several microsatellites made it possible to identify the remains. The two extrapolated genetic profiles were compared. This case also highlights the central role of forensic genetics to identifying skeletal remains by means of comparison. Firstly, genetic investigation were first applied in the forensic anthropological field in the 1980s in the study of anomalous and uncontrollable migratory flow, in particular of criminal acts, and the need for forensic investigation of skeleton. The most commonly used genetic marker are microsatellite or STR, short tandem repeat. A comparison between two genetic profiles obtained by typing several microsatellites make it possible to evaluate the compatibility between the two subjects. Microbiome and metagenetic analysis are inspired by the fact that human beings host diverse microbial communities at the level of all body surface. The manuscript aims to highlight the complexity of forensic investigation in human skeletal remains, with particular attention to the cornerstone role of forensic genetics in identifying identity to skeletal remains limited by the absence for an adequate comparator database.
Okay, my name is Dina Hafiz Mansur, and I will explain about the materials and method that used in this case study. Okay, first we have forensic anthropological investigations, which is a 1 milligram bone sample, femur, was taken for the dating study of bones. Okay, the aim is to determine the ethnicity and sex, estimate their height, and also their age. Okay, for determine the ethnicity, the scale were examined by looking their sagittal contour, orbits, nation, palate, mastoid, also knuckle crest, and many more. Okay, for the sex determination, they are examined by the morphological and craniometrical parameters of the skull, and also morphological parameters of the pelvis. Okay, then next we go to the investigation of forensic dentistry. The dental arches were reconstructed with a dental element found, and the teeth, the upper jaw, and the mandible were then inspected with exposure to a source of UVA light. Okay, the next, the third method is investigation of forensic genetics. Okay, for this, to isolate the DNA, allowing personal identification of the subject whose skeletal remains had been found, which is 2 teeth, and also 1 cm piece of the femoral shaft of the skeleton were removed. Okay, in particular, okay, basically 37 individuals were subject to DNA extraction at the forensic genetic laboratory of the University of Bury. Okay, then in particular, the preliminary stage of the investigations, the DNA was extracted and examined starting from the 37. Okay, then next we have lastly the method is investigations of forensic radiology, which is skull CT was performed. That's all from me.
My name is Nur Atira Auni binti Abdul Rahim, and I'm going to explain about the results for this case. There were some mummified soft tissues found on the corpse. The corpse lay in the supine decubitus position with upper limbs flexed to a trunk and lower limbs in a normal position. There were signs of microscopic animals and microfauna activity on the skeletal remains and in the surrounding environment. The skeleton appeared in a complete and intact with a light brown in color. As we can see from the picture, this is the skulls with label. From the corpse skull, the skull was intact and complete, with a fracture on the right portion on the nasal bone, and there were also dental elements that have been determined by the partial dentures. From the remaining body that left, the skeleton were identified to have hyoid bone, which the body and large horns were intact but disjointed. Spine, all the vertebrae were present intact. Clavicle and scapula, the joint complexes were intact and interarticulated. The ribs and sternum were intact and interarticulated, while the pelvis intact but disjointed from the sacrum. For the upper limbs, the right humerus were intact and preserved, but the left limbs were disjointed. Ulna and radius were present and intact. The bone of complete hand, pisiform bone, and the bones of the distance of the carpus and distance of phalange from 4 to 5 on the left hand were missing. For the lower limbs, femur, patella, tibia present bilaterally, while the soles of both feet were complete. For the determination of size, the skull had a long but not very robust, with thin and sharp supraorbital, small and rounded inclined mastoid, pronounced frontal and parietal bones, spherical orbit with sharp edge, forehead regular and head and U-shape of palate. The nuchal crest and the insertion crest of nuchal muscles, glabella, cheekbones, and minimal development of mastoids. Other than that, the pelvis appeared to be low and wide with broad, heart-shaped pelvic cavity. Subpubic angle was shaped like an inverted U. Preauricular sulcus were present. Sacrum flattened in anteroposterior, which it is an extending from front to back direction. These elements, moreover, for the skull and pelvis, indicates that the corpse is a female. Lastly, the determination of ethnicity for the corpse. By looking at the characteristic of the skeleton and the corpse skull, the skull had a circular eye socket with square margins. The nasal was narrowed and lie high up on the face. The nasal bridge had a sharp angle, and the teeth were small and set closely to each other. Hence, this characteristic, by looking at the characteristic, the corpse ethnicity is said to be a Caucasian.
My name is Muhammad Amirul Shahril bin Ramlan, and I will continue for my parts, which is the discussions of the cases. Based on the results or the photo that had been taken on the cases, the judicial investigation described in the cases majorly at identifying the individual whose skeletal remains had been found. Furthermore, by displaying the body or a photo of the victim's face to persons they knew in real life, the remains of an unknown subject can be personally identified, such as in an abandoned cadaver, tissues transformation is complete on average within 3 to 5 years based on the bones. Hence, the standardized operating protocols therefore provide the preliminary definitions of generic identification characteristics such as ethnicity, sex, age, height, and etc. It is also capable of ascertaining the anthropometric connotations of the individual to be identified. From the results and the investigation that we made, we can also know that the anthropological examinations of the remains allowed to identify the person, such as we can know that the person is from the Caucasian ethnic groups and the sex is females. She have a height of 156 plus minus 4 cm and the age is between 47 and 50 years. In the present cases also obtained the generic DNA profiles from the two molars was possible without using extractions from the femur, which is from the bones. Besides, it was feasible to determine the cause of death from all the anthropological evidence that surfaced to be a severe injury brought on by the hostility. Through the DNA extractions, we also knew that the lady, who was 51 years old and from Holland, had traveled to Italy in the year before the discovery of the skeletal remains. Through the investigation of the police, it was discovered via the compatibility of the two DNA profiles that she has been a part of a prostitution ring.
As a conclusion, the case described illustrates the central role of forensic genetics in identifying skeletal remains using comparison. The search for a missing person is challenging for law enforcement officers and requires collaboration between states. On the contrary, the individual must remain at the center of future philosophical, sociological and legal work while introducing further provision to make identification more accessible internationally.